Good morning, and thank you for attending the webcast, Supercharge Your Application Delivery with Pivotal and VMware. I'm happy to introduce Al Sargent, Director of Product Marketing, Pivotal CF, who is sitting in for Rosie Ponsgrass, and Jay Marshall, Principal Cloud Development Strategist, VMware vCloud Air Team. Please feel free to submit your questions anytime during the webcast on the console. We will answer your questions at the end, or if we can't get to your question, we'll get back to you by email. Thanks again for being here, and now I'll hand it off to Al and Jay.
I'm Al Sargent, part of the Pivotal CF product team.
Hey guys, Jay Marshall from VMware vCloud Air. Thanks for joining.
Together we have an exciting story to tell about the journey to enterprise platform as a service and how this new cloud platform is really the next step in accelerating application development, deployment, and delivery. You might have heard of PaaS from the public PaaS solutions that are available on the market. What we're here to tell you about today is enterprise PaaS or private PaaS and how to use it to supercharge your own cloud for application delivery speed. So there isn't a company I talk to today, whether it's their CIOs, their IT leaders, their line of business execs, that isn't affected by software. So let's dig into that a little bit today and talk about what that means, not just for developers, but for the IT Cloud Ops team as well. First, let's go ahead and talk about how software has become an economic weapon. Today, software is built into every product and has become the means to innovation and industry disruption. We hear this across industries around the globe. There isn't one meeting where they have said, hey, the software big data thing, it's not affecting me, I'm not to change anything. So what I'd like to do is talk through our observations of how companies are being competitive and disruptive, and how Pivotal CF, our commercial distribution of Cloud Foundry, is able to bring that ability to disrupt to the enterprise in a very consumable yet enterprise-ready way. As we built Pivotal CF, we noticed that agility and rapid software delivery were really affecting the way that enterprises have delivered applications, and that enterprises were interested in this change. It really was game on for enterprises that need to compete or be disrupted by a competitor. Let's look at this trend from a more practical, perhaps comparative manner. If you look at five top startups, namely Airbnb, Nest, Tesla, Square, and Uber, together they generated more than $50 billion in market valuation growth since 2011. In contrast, the top 5 traditional IT companies, namely IBM, Oracle, HP, Cisco, and Microsoft, have had combined 32 years, it's 8 years of less than 2% growth. Why is this happening? And what does it imply for those enterprises who have placed a huge portion of their IT budget on these vendors? If we look at expectations over time, the X and Y axes respectively, we see that new companies are creating new business models that are defining new customer experiences. The client-server age was really defined by improving productivity of tens of thousands of employees. In contrast, these new startups have built up their business model on refining the experience and engagement with millions of devices, each in their hands of their customers. And so really, you can think of this as a generational and paradigm and business shift. What these new companies are doing is they're taking in millions of dollars in VC investment and creating billions in market value to disrupt and dilute traditional industries. And the way they're doing this is by using new cloud platforms and methods that entrenched legacy IT platforms simply cannot support. And this leaves traditional IT lagging at that 2% growth rate. And more importantly, for establishing companies, this creates what we call the innovation gap. This results in lost market value, lost market share, profitability, and lagging customer retention, and even irrelevance for many of the established industry players. So bottom line is companies across all industries, whatever their size, need to iterate quickly with technology. So let's look at another option that companies have tried. Traditional IT vendors have caused these silos to emerge. They hold apps, data, and enterprises captive in the private cloud. They are proprietary, largely closed source, and maintain a hold on the enterprise because of that. So what some companies have done is try to shift their bargaining power invested in modern as-a-service technologies. But it turns out that the same shortcomings remain. Most SaaS and PaaS company solutions today force you to write your application to that specific platform, and that's where your application stays, much like writing to a particular OS. It sits in a public cloud somewhere and can't be moved.
Yeah, and the one key takeaway from this is, there's no denying that the cloud has revolutionized a lot of application development and delivery. That part's a given. But the challenge that we've seen in recent years is how this intersects with large enterprises and a lot of the challenges that we've taken 20-plus years to solve in the enterprise. And so there's a lot of great services, a lot of great options and things that you can use and consume via APIs or just completely as a service. But that lack of flexibility and interoperability, along with being locked into that single cloud's platform, has proven to be a challenge as we expand beyond individual apps into true enterprise strategies. So this is something that we tend to refer to, and we kind of take this from a Forbes article that we read last year, this Hotel California cloud, okay, where you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. So a lot of our approach to this stance is around this concept of a hybrid cloud, and in our case, vCloud Air, where you have full compatibility between the workloads that are running in your on-premises data center on vSphere and any compatible private cloud or public cloud with vCloud Air and our vCloud Air network. And so the key here is that for the existing enterprises and the workloads that we've built over years, those aren't going away anytime soon. So it's not locking into what you have before, but with the partnership between VMware and Pivotal, the ability to actually do both your existing workloads, expanding those to the public cloud, but also enabling your developers to build next-generation apps through platform as a service.
Let's go ahead and talk, thanks Jay, let's go ahead and talk through the evolution of cloud architecture. So what we've done as part of this building of Pivotal CF is to analyze a lot of the anthropology and really cultural behaviors behind these modern, hyper-competitive software companies. And we found three things. First, we found that it all really begins with an agile process. This ability to iterate and rapidly change what you do is what really gives you competitive advantage. If you can't change what you're doing, then you might as well have made the wrong bet. And no one is really smart enough to know 8 months or a year out from now what a particular product offering should be and how to get it perfect on the first pitch. There's always a tuning process. That's what competitive companies do today with software. They iterate. They also really focus on horizontal scalability. So in the old world, everything was written for Java and written for Big Iron, very stateful Java EE. That was the scale-up model, building huge servers and building up the VMs to ever larger sizes. Same goes for the OS, the database, the app server, and so forth. Things have really changed to be horizontal scale-out model. This is how people are doing both availability and scalability. And finally, they wrap a deep user analytic big data approach around all this from the beginning. So how do you know what to do in the coming week's iteration? How do you know how to change your offering? If you don't derive deep insights from an aggregation and collection of the data that interfaces with your application and tells you how users are interacting with it. And next, these software values go hand in hand with these changing delivery and release platforms. That in turn drives the adoption of a new way of delivering software, a next generation platform. This year, in 2014, around half of companies have initiatives around continuous delivery, agile, and DevOps. Now, each of these concepts is not independent of the other, and they often are used together by the development and operations teams to build high-quality software much quicker. First of all, agile programming is something we do here at Pivotal and are more than familiar with as a result. In this model, responding to changes takes precedence over a predetermined plan that may or may not remain valid over the course of time. So software is released much more frequently, but with smaller amounts of functionality in each release. Feature decisions are inspected and adopted constantly. And teams and stakeholders and customer interactions are often done face-to-face in order to provide that really high-quality feedback. Next discipline, DevOps, stands literally for developers and operations. DevOps is often misunderstood to be developers doing operations work or thought of as a title, but it really is a disruptive way of doing things. The concept behind it is about getting developers and operations teams to work closely together for the benefit of the business. And if you think about it, devs and ops really have opposing goals. Devs are incentivized to produce change, and ops are worried about stability. So the idea is to reduce friction between these goals and increase the speed at which applications are being produced. Finally, the next discipline, continuous delivery, is really where we have frequent releases of smaller amounts of functionality using highly automated build, test, and deploy processes. Finally, these new dev and release practices are driving new cloud application patterns and architectures. Emerging application patterns like microservices are defined by two things. First, systems made of small, independent, collaborating services. And second, multiple languages and services can often be in the same app. This concept of loosely coupled, language-independent services developed by smaller teams is gaining momentum. This approach is different from traditional monolithic applications that need to be changed all at once and are built on a brittle stack and only scale up rather than scale out to binding services. The interesting, or one might say challenging thing, is that this type of application pattern is hard, if not to do, without a PaaS. And the reason is because PaaS is well suited to manage component changes, to manage the health at the component level, and to manage apps independent of their language. So let's drill into an example. When you introduce this microservice concept of doing this for individual app components and doing this iteratively every day instead of every few months, you see that IT automation and scripting isn't able to handle this. So go back to our innovation gap concept and you see that you can't script your way through this. So in this example that you see on screen, we have a simple, modest web application with just 5 components. Not a big deal, right? But each of these has one distinct configuration file. So there are 50 configuration touches for a new web application release. So one of our customers employs about 20 full-time engineers just to deploy and maintain Tomcat, which is what you see in this example here. Now, traditional application processes have become incredibly complex. What we have here is an actual deployment framework where the text is intentionally blurred, but what you can see is how complex the release process actually is. Now, this complexity is one reason that development times are often measured in months, especially when you add up all the steps in development, testing, and deployment, and the production lifecycle. When we put this slide up for customers, often they laugh and they say, yeah, that's us, except it's probably worse than that. And that's where Pivotal and VMware come in. We give you the cloud platform in your private cloud or enterprise hybrid option to deliver next-generation applications faster. So now let's go ahead and talk about the era of agile operations. So platform as a service streamlines many processes. We've talked about that. Much the same with infrastructure as a service streamlines the provisioning of storage and servers through API calls. With platform as a service, you can now take that same approach and make provisioning middleware and data services simply a set of API calls, or what we call application dial tone. With PaaS, cloud operators can provide application dial tone to the developers. Now, if you think about this and how it can speed up your development process, you see that you don't have to configure VMs, databases, app servers, and load balancers. What this means is that developers can focus on development and not infrastructure plumbing. They can separate the concerns of application development and operations. And finally, they can eliminate the bottleneck of provisioning and deployment processes. So this is where platform as a service has evolved in the public cloud. Developer productivity is a key benefit that comes out of this.
Yeah, and this is a great build-out slide. It really encapsulates what a platform as a service is achieving. But the real beauty for me in this slide is it really also illustrates the power of the Pivotal and VMware partnership. Once again, as we mentioned before, when we're talking about most cloud providers, you're getting either the far right in some cases or maybe the IaaS and PaaS. But when you're talking about deploying Pivotal CF with VMware, if you have the types of workloads where you need control over the bare metal, what you're seeing on the far left with physical and virtualization layers, you can do that. So maybe it's for data sensitivity reasons. Maybe you have security and compliance options. Or maybe the workloads are just such that you want to have control down to that bare metal. So that in case of an emergency, you have somebody that can go and address it instantly and you don't have to work with the cloud provider to fix that issue. So it's just a great way of illustrating that you have choice when you're deploying Pivotal CF with VMware.
Thank you, Jay. So beyond developer productivity, our customers are seeing benefits for their operations teams as well. Now, just as virtualization came on the scene almost a decade ago and revolutionized data center productivity and capacity, platform as a service is radically transforming the way applications are delivered in the cloud into millions of customers. Infrastructure automation will only get you so far, as we talked about earlier. You still have to configure and script and manually manage all the different application configuration touch points. Platform as a service takes those 50 configuration steps, often separated by different groups and help desk tickets, into one platform touch. Much like how the iPhone was the revolutionary platform that brought together all the discrete devices we carried. Imagine going back to that, where you had to link together all these different platforms and make them talk to each other like it was a decade or 2 decades ago. Absolutely crazy. So the platform as a service layer is bringing with it the capability for health monitoring, auto-scaling, integrated logging, and a variety of other features that greatly simplify the burden placed on developers to configure middleware and operations to deploy these new apps into production. Pivotal CF brings that transition to the data center so that you shouldn't need to have different vendors when running applications. You shouldn't have a separate vendor for your operating system, middleware, load balancer, system provisioning, and policy management. Why should you use all these different devices in the world where a single platform displaces a myriad of unnecessary and expensive products? It makes absolutely no sense. So removing the complexity and manual dependencies enables the rapid iteration of software products to close the innovation gap. So here's what our application dial tone looks like. This is the interface that you ultimately have as a developer or operator when you use Pivotal CF on your cloud. And the thing that you'll see here is if you're ever logged into Amazon, and just use an IaaS, you might see hundreds of virtual machines all stacked up. And you might be thinking, okay, now what are these virtual machines and how are they related to each other? Where are the applications in this? And if I delete this one, what does that mean? With the platform as a service approach, what you see instead of VMs are applications, their domains and their URLs they're bound to, and the scale that you want to run them at. And that simplification really helps your IT teams move much faster and think much more clearly about what they have running on a particular infrastructure. Enterprise PaaS allows developers and operators to do things that are extremely difficult in a traditional environment, and different than in a public PaaS, where you can only have this environment running in your hybrid cloud, and you have zero control over the location and very little control over things like SLAs. The industry analysts are seeing these same trends, and you can get dozens of analyst reports that talk about the highest cloud, and you can get dozens of analyst reports that talk about how the highest cloud growth area right now is platform as a service. For instance, Information World believes that PaaS is one of the most critical initiatives to pursue in 2014 due to its ability to bring stronger ease to development.
Yeah, and as we mentioned before, talking about public cloud and the ease of consumption and how easy public cloud made it for developers and application development initiatives, our vCloud Air service does much of the same thing. So as you can see on the illustration here, we basically offer two core compute options, and that's how we actually sell our cloud. We do it in chunks of compute, which is very analogous to how enterprises consume compute resources today. So we have in the middle there what we refer to as the dedicated cloud. So if you want that physically isolated chassis sitting in our rack on the cloud, that's essentially your own private cloud. We also have a virtual private cloud, which is a little bit more similar to what you're used to seeing in a cloud, where we have logically isolated multi-tenant cloud services, but they are guaranteed. So if you get 5 gigahertz of compute, you're getting guaranteed 5 gigahertz. And so the layer on top that Al was mentioning a minute ago, being Pivotal CF, once again, it's providing that PaaS layer, but it's abstracted from the underlying infrastructure. So that circles back around to running either on our cloud or running on top of vSphere. A quick side note, and something that I threw in here because I thought it was relevant and once again ties back to the enterprise hybrid cloud strategy that we're seeing enterprises adopt, is disaster recovery on the right. So this is where you can actually, with a few clicks inside your own vCenter operations, you can click and perform disaster recovery actions directly to vCloud Air. So that gives you that enterprise backup, if you will, and DR that a lot of enterprises need, while at the same time enabling to do things like platform as a service. So once again, a very enterprise-grade platform. One other thing to call out here is our VMware Global Support Services. Anybody that's worked with VMware or is familiar with GSS knows that we have a very first-class support operations. We don't take your calls, and if it's not the hypervisor, hang up on you. We tend to work with our customers and work them through their issues. So myself, 15-plus years in the enterprise Java space, I'm not sure how many of my enterprise developer friends on the call right now have been involved in war rooms over the years, where developers, database admins, infrastructure folks, operations, managers of managers, and vendors are all on a phone trying to collect information and troubleshoot. So now add to that an additional cloud provider with their entire ops teams and infrastructure teams, and imagine the fun that brings to the table. So the nice thing is when you procure vCloud Air with VMware, whether it's occurring in the cloud or if it's happening in the four walls of your own data center on vSphere, you have one number to call, and we'll support you through the process no matter where you're running your workloads. And that extends to Pivotal CF as well.
Thanks a lot, Jay. So let's go ahead and talk now about enterprise cloud apps and how they can run together using Pivotal CF and vCloud Air. So we recently had back midsummer in June, CF Summit, and we had a number of companies who were early adopters of Cloud Foundry and Pivotal CF who came and speak, and they were very, very enthusiastic about them. And you can see some of them here across a wide range of industries, across a wide range of geographies. And really, there's a huge amount of momentum around Cloud Foundry itself and Pivotal CF in particular. And at CF Summit, there were some common themes that emerged. First was responding to disruptive change with PaaS, getting a platform on their cloud so that they can compete with internet upstarts. Another trend that we saw quite often was replatforming existing apps to run on a private enterprise PaaS that you control, that's in your selected data center or geography. And finally, using enterprise PaaS as an alternative to AWS public cloud for applications. Let's go ahead and talk about one of the customers who presented at CF Summit, and this is Axel Springer. And Axel Springer you might not have heard of if you're based in the U.S., but it really is an amazing company. They're the largest publishing house in Europe, 12,000 employees, operations in 40 countries. And it's a really interesting story because while a lot of publishers have failed in the internet age, Axel Springer really is the exception. They're on track to successfully transition to digital media, and actually half of their revenues are coming from their digital businesses. Now, a few years ago, Axel Springer needed to migrate all their print resources towards data centers, servers, software data, and so forth, and really shifting their emphasis, their infrastructure from printing presses to what they call the digital printing press, i.e., servers and databases and things like that. And in parallel, they began acquiring various companies, acquiring their own internet brands, and investing in startups. Now, this was a double-edged sword, because although these acquisitions provided Axel Springer with a wide range of digital media properties and audiences and revenue streams, it also created a mountain of technical debt that made, since these media properties were often built on widely varying technology stacks. Now, this model hindered integration and also increased operating costs. And they had literally thousands of media channels, so the problems were quite significant. What they needed was an application platform to accelerate time to market for high-quality digital media, but also to reduce operational expenses and maintain control over the content. So it's a pretty tall order. Now, what they wanted was automated continuous delivery processes for application updates. They wanted a modular architecture to reuse services across all of their digital media properties. So, for instance, something that would appear in a German newspaper might also appear in a newspaper in England. And finally, they needed to run all their infrastructure on infrastructure that they controlled in a European data center with data protected by European data privacy laws. So after a long evaluation process, Axel Springer chose Pivotal CF as their standard platform across all of its digital media properties. And they're leveraging it to create a wide range of reusable microservices and provide features for all kinds of different types of functionality: community, location, image scaling, voting, mobile push, and much more. And developers can build these microservices in whatever language that makes them most productive, whether it's Spring or Java, Ruby, Python, etc. And all of these work on Pivotal CF thanks to Pivotal CF's build pack technologies. And Axel Springer has also deployed Pivotal CF with RabbitMQ, MySQL, MongoDB, which allows them to connect to the external databases that they need to be able to provide content to all these wide range of internet properties. And for this, they use Pivotal CF's service broker. So it's a great story of the power of Pivotal CF and how it's enabled a company to transform to the internet age. Now, the benefits are really clear when you look both at developer and cloud operators being able to deliver in weeks and no longer in terms of months. And first, these benefits are twofold, or driven by two things. First, it's the IaaS benefits combined with developers and IT ops and infrastructures, teams all working together. All of these are combined back to the platform. And with Pivotal CF and VMware, you can start up this environment in literally days. You don't have to take a huge amount of time to do it. And then also there's a huge ecosystem behind Pivotal CF, so you have a wide range of different tools and tool chains that you can use to be most productive. And this helps further reduce complexity and helps you further automate at scale. Now, the way this works in practice is that a developer can simply push their application, and the platform simply auto-selects the runtimes. It deploys the apps. It provides a simple step to select and bind middleware and application and data services to all work together in one cohesive unit. And then the operator can very quickly establish the infrastructure, provision, add capacity on demand without any downtime. And every application can finally be scaled instantly without having to all the enterprise control, automation policies, and HA requirements applied as needed. So again, all this for delivery in weeks and days instead of in months.
And so to Al's point there, and kind of illustrating the benefits that you get out of a platform as a service, what we want to kind of close with here today is look at some examples of how to deploy this. If you decide, okay, great, this sounds wonderful, where do I start, right? So you can start with Pivotal CF on VMware right away. You can download the OVA for vSphere and drop it right into your own infrastructure. It also can be installed on vCloud Air, as mentioned before. So once again, giving you a choice of platforms for both private and public. So as this infographic kind of illustrates, your series of apps, whatever you might be building, and of course the associated runtimes that Al mentioned, you can deploy those either to vCloud Air or in your private vSphere data center. And once again, it's the same Pivotal CF platform. So you have that complete portability of the apps, both at the PaaS level and also at the infrastructure level running underneath. So if we look at a couple example use cases when we talk about hybrid flexibility, and I'll kind of circle back around again to some of the core value props of a hybrid cloud, and a lot of these are very similar. So I could take existing workloads in my data center, I can move them to vCloud Air. Some of the test dev type resources I want to do, I can have less demand and less capacity that I have to plan for in my own private data center. So a lot of those same value props apply to Pivotal CF. So if we look on the left and we talk about a hybrid strategy with Pivotal CF based on application lifecycle stage. So dev test environments and sandboxing and things like that are perfect candidates for things you might want to run on vCloud Air. And part of that is just because of scalability. You know, when we start adopting PaaS and taking advantage of all the benefits that it provides, it means your software development teams can very quickly take business ideas and transform them into technology solutions very, very quickly. I know one of the taglines we used to use was from idea to production in that day. But what that means is not all ideas are great, right? And it also doesn't mean that every software that you build or every piece of software you build is going to make it into production. So why provision all of that extra hardware in your own private data center and incur all that capital expenditure when you can just spin it up on the cloud? If it doesn't work, you just blow it away. But if you do spin it up and it works and it turns into something that you want to support in production, you know you have the flexibility to bring it back in-house. In the middle, where we talk about based on enterprise requirements, and we show vSphere on the left for your Tier 1 apps and vCloud Air for your Tier 2 Plus apps. Once again, this is based around the notion that perhaps your Tier 1 apps, you want to support those in-house down to the bare metal. And that gets back to some of the war room discussions we were having before. But the Tier 2 Plus apps maybe don't have quite the same SLAs, so you're going to take advantage of the cloud and some of the other savings and cost savings for those types of apps. And then finally on the right, when we say based on scale requirements, and I say vSphere for predictable scale and vCloud Air for burst scale, or what's commonly called web scale. What we mean by that is for predictable scale, if they're applications and it's kind of a standard app where you know the internal business users, so you can procure the exact hardware that maybe you need for that. But when we're talking about web scale, a couple of good examples are like mobile apps. You know, if you're actually rolling out a mobile app to your end users, are you going to have 100 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people all concurrently using that application? So how do you plan for that when you're going to procure hardware in your own data center? Things like marketing campaigns or, say, annual trade shows, your seasonal workloads. I used to work for an insurance company, so open enrollment is a perfect example, right? Why are you going to buy all of this hardware that's going to sit around 90% of the time being unused for that 10% of the time when you burst into it? So that's another example of where being able to do predictable scale and have all the control in vSphere, but for your web scale type applications, be able to roll those onto vCloud Air. So as we wrap up here with Al and I, if we boil it down to two basic bullet points that we want to walk away with here, every enterprise, and particularly those enterprises that already use software development for custom applications, you need to have a third platform architecture plan and a way to start doing web scale, super fast, super agile development and deployment. The second bullet point, Pivotal CF and VMware, and for public cloud, vCloud Air, are creating that leading enterprise alternative to what has traditionally been those siloed public clouds for these new types of application patterns. So it gives you the ability to do next-gen development while still getting the enterprise controls that we need. So for more information, before we turn over to questions, my friends at Pivotal are going to be hosting a Cloud Platform Roadshow that they're going on tour with. So the link is on your screen here, pivotal.io/platform-as-a-service/Cloud Platform Roadshow, a couple of dashes in there. Or you can subscribe to the All Things Pivotal podcast at pivotal.io/podcasts. And for myself, if you want to learn more about vCloud Air, I invite you to please go to vcloud.vmware.com. We roll out new services every 4 to 6 weeks, so please check back regularly and see all the things that we're rolling out onto our cloud. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. I know we may have some questions from our friends out on the webcast.
All right, thank you very much, Jay. Let's go ahead and take it to some questions. And so, first question is from Keith Taransky, and I'll just go ahead and read this out. The solution seems like a no-brainer for many corporate IT complexities. What makes it tough to sell? And thank you, glad you see that. What makes it tough to sell into our corporate IT environments? I think really, I'll take that first, and then Jay, you can go ahead and kick in there. One of the great things about this is VMware is obviously, and vSphere is obviously a very well-established solution in the enterprise. And vCloud Air is simply leveraging all the power of vSphere. So, it really is a pretty solid choice, and given VMware's, dominance in virtualization and proven track record.
I just want to say, Al said dominance. I don't like using words like that.
Yes.
No, it's a great point, because I think that the tough sell tends to be a little bit of an ideological sell, because platform as a service truly is kind of a both feet in transformational approach to application development. And so what really happens is once you get to the upper levels of management and, if they come out and tour the Pivotal Lab environment here in California and they start to see it in action, once people see the results and understand how it transforms that life cycle, it tends to turn into an easy sale quickly. But your point, Keith, is well taken. Initially, it's so different than how we've done things from the past. It's just education and getting people to understand exactly how it works and why it's so beneficial.
Thank you, Jay. And another question from Sean Hartstock. Question on scaling Cloud Foundry itself, Pivotal CF itself. What kinds of resources does Cloud Foundry's controllers and so forth consume in typical use cases? Again, I can take that, and then Jay can go ahead and correct me. So one of the really cool things about Pivotal CF is that you have this thing called Operations Manager, and it's essentially a web front end. There's also a command line interface and APIs as well if you prefer to do that. But where you can go ahead and you yourself as an operator can go ahead and specify the amount of memory, the amount of virtual machines for all the various layers of Pivotal CF itself. And that's really great because, if you want to have multiple cloud controllers, you can do that. If you want your, Java applications to have a certain amount of memory, and then you might want your Go applications to have a lower amount of memory, you can specify all these things. And you can do it in Operations Manager in a very easy to manage type of way. So we give you a lot of options as a cloud operator to be able to do this control and to provide your essentially to provide your developers with a menu of options of good services. So you could have essentially a Java runtime. You could say I want to provide my developers with a small, medium, large Java runtime, and that might be I don't know, just to throw some numbers out there, half gig of memory, a gig of memory, and 2 gigs of memory. And then, your choices, your small, medium, large for, let's say, a Go application might have smaller amounts of memory. It might be 100 megs, 200 megs, or 500 megs for each app instance. So it's a complicated answer that we don't have time to go into now, but, because there are literally, over a dozen different components and tiers to Cloud Foundry itself. but suffice to say, we make it very easy for the operator to control that.
Yeah, and to Al's point, Sean, we may reach out to you offline here simply because, when we talk about scaling, and I noticed you said scaling CF itself. So, as Al was mentioning, from an app or per app perspective, or how to allocate resources to spaces and how those spaces get delivered to developers versus the entire Pivotal CF, implementation. They're kind of very different answers, so we might tap you offline on those.
Yeah, and I guess one last point on scaling. Baidu, which is the Google of China, so you can imagine they have a huge workload. They are literally one of the top 5, if not one of the top 3 largest web properties in the world. They actually run on Cloud Foundry, so they can handle massive amounts of scale. So, in terms of how, can we scale? Yeah, absolutely we can scale. And Baidu, just go to baidu.com and you can see for yourself. Next question from James Knapp. What tools or services are available to help partners help customers migrate development platforms to Pivotal and help them move applications to Pivotal? So we've got an amazing story here. One of the really cool things with Cloud Foundry and with Pivotal CF is our build pack technology. Credit to our friends at Heroku for coming up with the idea for a build pack. What we've done is we've taken that idea and we've really expanded upon it. And what this allows you to do, a build pack allows you to do, is essentially specify all the layers of the application stack that you need. For instance, for a Java application, it might be what JVM you're looking for. Is it OpenJVM? Is it OpenJDK, or is it the Oracle JVM? What version thereof? What types of other assets in terms of application dependencies, various jar files you might need, or WAR files you need, what have you. Essentially assembling that entire stack of your application runtime environment if needed, like a JVM, the application itself, and then any configuration for that application. And so what this means is you can literally take an app. We've literally taken a Spring app, for instance, that's running in Oracle WebLogic, taken the core WAR file, and then pushed it into Pivotal CF. And literally, we call this demonstration gone in 60 seconds, because you can literally take a Spring app and move it into Pivotal CF in literally a minute or maybe 2 minutes. And it's pretty impressive to see. So we invest a lot of engineering time and resources to make these transitions go very, very smoothly. And again, we maintain just a huge amount of effort in terms of being able to pull down all the right components and essentially make it just work like magic. And what this means is a lot of work on the back end to track those dependencies and the correct versions thereof. And we do that for Java, and we do that for other types of applications that we support as well, namely PHP, Python, Ruby, Go, and I'm probably missing 1 or 2 others there, Node.js as well. So we make it really straightforward. And then we provide native services. Today, those are native services available for developer use. We're working on making those more and more robust over time. We also allow you to get out to those services through a service broker. So you can get out to, let's say, you might have an Oracle database system of record. We make it really easy to get out to that Oracle database. You don't need to move that Oracle database onto Pivotal CF. You can keep that Oracle database in place and connect to it as an external service in our service broker. And we make it really easy to bind that service to Pivotal CF. And all the credentials and all the different pieces of connectivity information you have are implicit in that binding.
Yeah, and one thing I might add on top of there is, one of the core central themes of what Al is describing here is the fact that, a lot of applications could move fairly seamlessly. And the example I'll use, a lot of my work years ago was on the WebSphere platform, 10, 15 years or so ago. And what happened was a lot of enterprises, because of the investment in WebSphere, even Hello World, people would deploy to WebSphere because that was their standard stack of choice, right? So what I've seen a lot of customers doing and finding an easy way to start getting into this is, identifying those kinds of applications. Lots of large enterprises have hundreds, even 1,000 or more custom-built applications, and some of them might be simple little, Java apps, little servlet-based apps, and that's all. those are very, very easy to move, and it's a great way to just start in the process of using a PaaS. When you start getting into more heavily integrated J2E services and things like that, that's when some of the challenges come in. But once again, like any other kind of app migration or replatforming efforts, that stuff just gets into elbow grease. But the smaller, lighter apps are very easy to move.
Yeah, definitely. And to expand on Jay's point, we do have a really strong ecosystem, which, you mentioned, how do you migrate development platforms? The key thing is a lot of the development toolchains already are supported in Cloud Foundry. And so, for instance, if you look at Java application servers, so we provide support for Apache Tomcat. We have support for our own TC server. We also have their community has already built a WebLogic build pack. IBM has contributed a Liberty Profile build pack, and then also the community has contributed a Wildfire or JBoss App Server build pack. So, in many cases, you can actually use the same application server that you're using today. We also support things like Jenkins. We support a wide range of continuous integration, continuous deployment type tools. We integrate with Eclipse. We integrate with Spring Tool Suite. So, huge amount of integration with the stuff you already know and use today. So, another question from Sean Hartstock again. Where can I get a hold of a VM OVA and start working and doing scale testing of a CF install? Are there tools, profiling CF performance and trouble spots, and any tips on figuring out how much it will cost to run CF itself? So I think the best thing to do, Sean, is to look at, go to network.pivotal.io and look at what downloads we have available. It's really easy to create an account. Anyone can do so. It's free to do so. Download, start working with it, and you can start to install PCF itself, start to play with it. So that's one way you can go. A second way you can go, if you don't want to install a bunch of platform, but you just want to build an app and see it run on Cloud Foundry, is to go ahead and to run.pivotal.io. That's what we call Pivotal Web Services. And there what you can do is you can take your existing application artifacts, push them into our hosted platform as a service, and start to run them in a very short amount of time. That's Pivotal Web Services. That's the second option. And of course, I'll go ahead and talk to Jay about the capabilities around vCloud Air.
Yeah, exactly. I think the key here would be your VMware teams and Pivotal teams. I think if you're looking for guidance and kind of help in doing that, and as far as the cost, your local VMware Pivotal reps can help you with kind of calculating load, and your local field engineering teams can be of assistance there as well. I think as far as profiling tools and performance and trouble spots, I noticed, and you can confirm this for me, Al, that our friends at New Relic had recently threw some things in for us to help do monitoring of applications and things like that as well, which will be helpful to folks.
Yeah. We work very closely with New Relics, also AppDynamics. We also export a bunch of our metrics through JMX. We work with log providers such as Splunk and so forth. So yeah, a lot of integration in terms of monitoring and logging. It looks like we've got some other questions here. So let's see. One question is from Ashwin Gupta. How would you rate security and confidentiality of data on the private kind of offering for vCloud? You want to go ahead and...
So I think that when you talk about the vSphere portion inside your private data center, obviously since it's in your own four walls, that comes into play. When you talk about vCloud Air, Ashwin, it might be something we'll reach out to you with as well, because we see that differently with different customers. So for example, things like in-guest encryption, or depending on what your requirements are. So I have to find the link and give it to you, which I might do that offline. I know we're going to send a thank you email out with a lot of those details. I'll make sure we include that in the thank you email. We have a whole page dedicated to all the different security and compliance regulations that we've passed. So when it comes to things like HIPAA and a lot of the things that people are looking for in security and confidentiality, out of the gate, we cover a lot of those, and of course our roadmap is full of those as well. So we'll follow up on that in the thank you email.
And then also in terms of Pivotal CF, we have a very, very strong commitment towards security. One of the things we do there is we have very strong security isolation. So if, let's say, somebody is able to log into a container that is within Pivotal CF, they can only see the connection, the SSH connection that they're using to connect in, and whatever port that container is listening on. So there are competing solutions out there where you can see all the connections for all the containers on a particular host, and essentially you provide hackers with a roadmap of all the different systems that they can crack into. We don't do that with Pivotal CF. We provide very strong security isolation. We also now have application security groups so that an app specifying which IP addresses or range of IPs or networks a particular application can egress out into in terms of its network traffic. So again, that's another way to really make sure that you have the right kind of security isolation. And then also I think it's really worth noting that on the Apache Software Foundation, there's a very small collection of people on their security team. It turns out that I think there's 5 of them on the security team. It turns out that 2 of those are Pivotal employees. So we really, we hear about issues very, very early on, and will, as a result, can start working on those to roll in the appropriate fixes into our products. And so with things like the shell shock bug and so forth, and Poodle, we're on top of things within literally minutes of finding out about them to roll out fixes to our customers. All right, and Jay, what other good questions do we have here?
So we also have from Ashwin about what are the key principles for any application to become eligible for PaaS, if any. I think we hit on some of that before as well when we kind of talked about the Hello World apps and the kind of apps. I don't want to oversimplify like that's the only kind of apps you can migrate, of course. But I think that to the earlier question from Ryan Driver about the best place to start for SMB and doesn't have dedicated teams, I think what I'm alluding to is for folks that haven't started down this path, PaaS can be a very, what's the word I'm looking for, very intimidating space to get into. And so a lot of these architectures around microservices, and particularly if you look at the larger implementations, it can be very daunting. So I think once again, I would circle back around to if you have existing apps, or if you go and look at some of the base apps. I know Spring.io has a tremendous landing page around different ways to get started with the Spring framework. That's where I always point people to go and kind of kick the tires and get started with it. So if it's existing applications, once again, if it's J2E and a lot of kind of heavyweight Java apps, we have our Pivotal Labs folks that are absolute experts with application development, and we can engage with you there as well.
Yeah, and that's great. And then also a couple other things to look for online. First of all, Google microservices, and that's a really strong emerging architectural pattern. Microservices apps are great for migrating onto PaaS and Pivotal CF in particular. And we've actually got a number of talks again online that you'll find if you Google microservices and PaaS or microservices in Cloud Foundry, where we talk about the process of moving apps to Pivotal CF and then also building them from the get-go in Pivotal CF. That's the first thing. Second thing is if you Google 12-factor applications, if you implement these 12 factors in your applications, it makes them a lot easier to migrate to platform as a service as well. So those are 2 things, 12-factor apps and microservices.
And stateless sessions.
Yes, stateless sessions, absolutely. Another great question is, what's the best place to start for an SMB customer who doesn't have a dedicated development team or DevOps team? And a great way to look there, again, I would say look at Pivotal Web Services is a great way to go. Go to run.pivotal.io. And then I'd also suggest looking at vCloud Air as well as another place to go as well for being able to spin up.
Yeah, on vCloud Air, it's very easy to spin up virtual machines, and even if it's an SMB customer, Ryan, feel free to reach out to us as well if you want to offline to kind of understand a little bit more of the scope that you're talking about, because even a lot of SMB folks, the notion of not having to have infrastructure, be it maybe having some workloads today that are based on vSphere, there's lots of great ways to start looking at how to integrate that into your platform.
Yeah, great, thanks. And then another question from Ashwin Gupta is, how easy is it to develop connectors from Pivotal CF to an external service, let's say Oracle or IBM MQ? So we actually have, if you Google Cloud Foundry Oracle, and and maybe put in user-defined service there, you'll find a tutorial on how to do it. It literally is, you're taking the Oracle Connect string. If you've done any Oracle DBA work, you'll know about what an Oracle Connect string is. Simply the IP address pointing to the Oracle database, the database instance, and then the credentials. And literally, if you have that information, it's very straightforward to create what we call a user-defined service that connects out of Cloud Foundry and into an external service such as Oracle or IBM MQ. All right, so let's see. I think that pretty much wraps up all the questions, just going and scanning through. So with that,
yeah, with that, we will be sending out a follow-up email in the next 2 days or so, which will have the links to the SlideShare deck as well as a replay to the session and plenty of more information if you're interested. So thanks for joining, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for your time.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.